All right, everybody, welcome back. This is our next episode for Positive Leadership as we're following one brave venturer to her first year with Positive Leadership. And so I'm Adam Seaman. I'm the developer of Positive Leadership. Unless, of course, something goes wrong, then I'm not. I don't know anything about it. But so far, nothing goes wrong. That's part of being a positive leader. And so we're going to talk today about resilience, but I thought it'd be good to do a little recap on what happened with advocacy. So Jennifer has some things to share. And yeah, take it away, Jennifer, with what your experience has been with advocacy.
Sure. Well, hello, everybody. So the advocacy chapter aligned with our Environmental Sustainability Program Day. And so it was a perfect match, again, not planned, but worked out really nicely to support some of the topics we were focused on throughout the day. And this was actually, I've been experimenting with the format in terms of how I facilitate the discussion each month. Sometimes I've shown a video, and sometimes I've had really detailed PowerPoint, or we've integrated group exercise. And this time I wanted to just sort of experiment with just having a discussion and just no PowerPoint, just go in with some good questions. And I think, as you say, Adam, throw the ball into the group and let them ping pong it around. So that's what I did. And I came in, we had a morning discussion in the morning about the conservation of a important local watershed. Mm-hmm. And we came in before lunch. So it was an hour before lunch to have our positive leadership discussion. And so we got together, and the first thing I said to everybody is, all right, so advocacy was a great chapter. Who read it? And it was crickets, like tumbleweed going by. And so this was the first month that happened, that it didn't seem like the majority. There were a few people who raised their hand, but definitely the majority of the group seemed as though they had not read the material. So I immediately panicked, but then thought, okay, just go with this. And just reminded folks that, they're expected to read the material, they're encouraged to read the material, and that they're really only going to get out of the material what they put into it. So I just, reminded them of that. And then I just went with my plan. I had some questions that I had planned, and I started throwing it out to the group around some of the key ideas and concepts of the chapter. And to my surprise, we ended up having this really robust and rich discussion. And I think because the material is so relatable, you can relate to it. A lot of the concepts, particularly in advocacy, they're pretty straightforward. So even though people had not read it, they engaged in the discussion, and we really got a lot out of it. So it ended up being surprisingly a really nice part of the day. And I think with some of the topics that came up when we were talking about compelling cases and how do you create those compelling cases, a lot of real life examples circled around our current political campaign that's going on. A lot of talk about Donald Trump, how he has constructed this compelling message, but yet is he really authentic? So we had a really nice discussion, and it seemed like the politics provided that, a nice example for us to bounce ideas off of. So it was good.
I think that's great. Yeah. And I think your situation that you experienced is common. No matter what the material is, people are just so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Which is actually great, because it's going to feed into our conversation today about resilience. And so, I think that this will be a really good conversation for that. But the reality is people are just so overwhelmed. What can we do to inspire people to read? We can't force them to read. So what you did was the right thing is when you have a really engaging conversation, it'll make people want to go back and read it. Like when they get to the conversation, and then it's really, oh, wow, this is really relevant. And okay, yeah, I see all these applications, and other people share these stories that made me think about it more. It warrants going back to reread it. But I think in general, while we encourage people to read it, that we should always be prepared to just have the conversation so it could be standalone. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the great things. That's one of the reasons I designed the PowerPoints as I did. Mm-hmm. I don't, if your people are reading it, then the PowerPoints, I don't want it to be like a long PowerPoint heavy,
Right.
but, but the idea that you have the materials on the PowerPoint that could provide some base understanding of things to have an engaging conversation is one of the things that kind of makes positive leadership a fuller program, because it's not just a book, it's the other pieces that support it. So I think that's great. And what was the topic of the day? The class topic?
It was environmental sustainability.
Okay, all right.
So,
Good.
I mean, it just, in fact, we had a panel discussion in the afternoon, which was after our positive leadership group discussion, but it was on local energy. And so kind of our goal with the session was to increase the energy literacy of our group. And we have a lot going on here locally with wind and solar, but we also have some really big natural gas projects coming in. And so lots of assets, but lots of challenges in terms of the environmental sustainability lens. And so we had advocates on our panel that's what they do. I mean, they're constantly advocating for a cause with their local legislators. And so it just fit really nicely with the day, which was unintentional. But so even with our discussion, that so many of the themes that you talk about in the chapter were present in so many other parts of the discussion without me having to really even try that hard to do it. So it worked out well.
That's great. Very good. All right. So speaking of advocacy, my dog is barking, so let me quell that.
No problem.
Did I say dog? I meant one of my employees, headquarters, the International Compound for Positive Leadership. So that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people might hear environmental sustainability. I should just pair that with resilience. And then here it is that, there's this new angle on advocacy that allows you to see both advocacy and environmental sustainability through this different lens that you might not have otherwise discovered. So that's why it's really important to just keep the flow of the chapters consistent, and there will always be some sort of integration between the two. So question, was there any follow-up discussion at the end of the day where you brought it back to advocacy?
We actually ended the day with that panel. And it was a really full day, so we had to hard stop. So we really didn't get time to do a nice, solid wrap up. But we have these things after each program day. We call them our monthly social clubs, where one class member is responsible for picking a location nearby to where we're ending. It's usually a bar or a restaurant, and they invite the class to come. And it's not required. It's just sort of a
happy hour.
Come if you, like a happy hour. And we had, I think, 8 people show up to that. And the conversation around advocacy did continue.
Yeah.
But we didn't really have a full wrap up. So
yeah, well, just an idea on that too. So when you start off your next session, well, we have challenges coming up for this one we'll get into. And it would be, if there was an opportunity, you would say, all right, guys, where we left off last time was advocacy. And then we had our panelist speakers. And did you see, remind them of the 4, pieces, the clarity, the compelling case, and conviction, and all those pieces. And then just say, did you see any of that? Or even, did you see any examples of advocacy in your own personal journeys since we last met? And that would be a good way. And then another thing to do might be to say, we had some really interesting discussion at our social hour, and then include a few points from that, because then it might make people say, oh, you know what? That sounds like it would be you might have people be like, I don't want to go to no happy hour and sit around awkwardly. But no, if there's some really interesting conversation, then I think that would entice some people who are attracted to that to come more to those. So let's
and I did start our discussion on advocacy. I did start with a recap of, okay, last month was purpose. And we talked a little bit about purpose. I asked people if they had done anything in the field guide, just to kind of bring it back and review. So yeah, I think that that's a good, and you encourage this, but to start off each session with that sort of, okay, what did we learn last time? What was your experience over the last month? And I keep tying it back to our projects too, our class projects. What is your team experiencing? Things like that.
That's great. Yeah. And so I call that layering, not like, oh, that's an amazing word, but just that idea that you're layering in the content, not just in the designated time when you talk about positive leadership, but you're layering it in with other things, the social hour, the debriefs at the end of the day, within the context of your class projects, with those. And in one of our programs, I just got an email. They just rounded out their program, and they had their project teams present, and it was just really cool. Let me just see if I can pull it up real quick, because I think it was just a really cool letter that just kind of shows how you could use it. So basically, what she said is, so we had our last session last night, and I really wanted to test the class and come armed with questions to make them go back and think about the positive leadership lessons. She said, but before I could even do that, each group, and many of these groups were emotional, that's in parentheses, not quotes, in parentheses, tied, so let me start over. Well, before I could do that, each group, many of which were emotional, tied the positive leadership lessons and what they learned as a group and how they found personal growth with regard to the projects and positive leadership, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. It was so cool. Some very passionate presentations. You would have loved it, which I would have. And she said, once again, here is an open invitation to come up. She wasn't going to come to any of their sessions. And then just thanks for the positive leadership stuff and how it's been such a valuable component to their program. And I love hearing that. And that isn't to toot my own horn. It's to say, this thing can really be a resonant part of your program. And the layering is what helps do that, and not just treating it as one thing. But in the first year, it may be hard to do the layering because you're still kind of wrapping your mind around it. So,
yeah.
But especially in the second year, once you've already been through it, if you can start to layer things into it, that's really helpful. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about what you have coming up this time. You have resilience, and it's falling on your legislative day, and there's some logistical challenges.
Yeah. So it's our government day, but every year we and our people love it. We go to our state house in Boston, which is about an hour and a half drive, and Boston traffic is always a nightmare. But we spend the day there, and it's just a chaotic day in terms of scheduling, because I am completely in the hands of our state senators and our state representatives. So we show up, and then they tell us where to go, what to do. So I don't, I structure all of our agendas to have one set hour at least on positive leadership. And this time I'm not going to have that. So I will be on a bus ride into Boston for an hour and a half and a bus ride home back to South Coast, our region. So there's some space. And so I presented this challenge to you, Adam, as, okay, how do we fit this in a way that's meaningful? I don't want to gloss over the chapter and just forget about it. I still want people to have that opportunity to discuss it, to let all the ideas soak in. And also, how can we tie this to the day's topics when I can't really rely on our state reps to be reading positive leadership and talking about it. So yeah, that's the challenge this month.
So over email, we exchanged some ideas. We talked about trying to organize some kind of discussion over a bus. But, now that I think about it, you're standing on a bus and you're driving along. You're not going to have a meaningful conversation.
It's going to be loud. Yeah, no, I thought about that. I'm like, can I get a mic or on the bus? How can I do this? Yeah.
I know, right? So then we kind of switched to this idea of discussion partners, maybe seat partners. I don't know how many people fit in a seat if it's 2 by 2. Mm-hmm. But that would be an option of maybe preparing a little discussion guide ahead of time with some key concepts or quotes from the resilience chapter, and then some discussion questions, and seeing what you could generate that way. So that might be one avenue. and it could be that maybe once you get there, if you're waiting around, you could have some discussion time. And then it could be that you just don't have any time to do any of the discussion. And so you might have to bump back resilience to, to the next month. That could be the fallback plan, so that you're just prepared if you don't ever get to it. I know you like to be very organized and have things structured, and I know your StrengthsFinder profile, but to have a backup plan allows you to structure in the possibility that you may not even be able to get to the conversation in a meaningful way, which is in itself a test of resilience. Because isn't that how that happens, where you have a plan, and every prize fighter has a plan until they walk into until they get punched in the face. That's a quote I heard somewhere along the way. No plan survives its first collision with reality. That's another quote that I heard that kind of captures this idea. So it really is about resilience, to be able to, have a contingency plan, and so that's what I'd suggest. And then when we get into the content a little bit, maybe for resilience, maybe we'll discover some things that might be useful for a bus conversation, or maybe you make a video like we're doing here and they watch it ahead of time, and maybe we do that. Maybe you and I make a video just talking about resilience, and then that would be something for them to watch ahead of time or afterwards, or both.
Yep. Interesting idea.
So we can play with that. So what I'd like to do is jump into the content for resilience, and then take it from there. But any other last things before we move into that, about advocacy or about what else?
No, but just jumping back to a chapter or two. I am getting so much out of the purpose chapter.
Oh, cool. Personally.
Yeah. And just the PALM method, I use it all the time.
Oh, that's great.
And in fact, I have a board meeting tomorrow where we're going to be moving into strategic planning in the next 6 months. And so we're doing an exercise around purpose, and I'm going to show Simon Sinex starting with the why video. And so I've been just doing a lot of mulling over like this idea of purpose, both my organization, but also in everything I do, with creating an agenda for a meeting, or, so anyway, that particular chapter for me personally has really resonated and been very valuable.
Oh, so glad to hear it. And sometimes it might be cool to check back with your participants, because they might be having similar things. Maybe somebody's still mulling over authenticity, or something. And that's another aspect of layering, is to kind of go back and reconnect, link back. It's actually what the word religion means. Like, the etymology of religion means to link back, Just a little interesting side note that has nothing to do with anything. But I've been using the POM method with my clients. Purpose, outcome, method is in the middle. And so I'm working with a foundation here, a philanthropic foundation, and they're just revisiting everything, because they're going back and clarifying their purpose, which is changing, how they go about funding, who they want to fund. And so once you clarify the purpose, then you could talk about the outcomes. What outcomes would reflect our purpose? And then once you clarify the outcomes, then you say what methods would support the outcomes. So you have purpose, outcome, and then in the middle are methods. And what happens is most people start with methods. So I think I should probably make a video on that too, just a separate thing, because I talk about it a lot, and I think it's a really useful tool. I'm so glad that you're getting value from that as well.
Have you heard of David Grant?
I have not.
So he has a book called the Social Profit Handbook. So I don't want to get off topic, but anyway, he basically has kind of a version of POF, which he calls formative evaluation.
Ooh, all right.
And it's all about planning. He calls it planning backward. So as I've been reading this book, I'm like, oh, but that's the PALM method.
Very good. Oh, cool.
And that's also the golden circle.
Yes.
So it's a very similar concept with different
language. So David Grant, what's the name of that book?
The Social Profit Handbook.
The Social Profit, and is it PROFIT or PHET?
PRO.
Okay.
Anyway, it's all about evaluating nonprofits, evaluation measures, and it's interesting anyway.
Okay, so it's profit as in PROFIT.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Not like profit, like a.
Not like the profit, no.
Yeah. All right, I'll check it out.
Yeah, check it out.
And you also mentioned Simon Sinek's book. We may as well mention that in case anybody's interested. And it's called Start With Why. I was actually reading it last night, coincidentally.
Yeah.
He stole my material. He didn't know he stole it, but all right. So let's do this. Let's get into resilience a little bit and cover some ground regarding the PowerPoint. So I'm going to switch us over to share screen mode, and we're going to make this thing big, and then we're going to get it all good. All right. So Jennifer, let's get into resilience. And so all of this fancy stuff. All right, I don't know what's going on there, but now we just kind of remind people of this model. What I want to do eventually is make this like a poster that you could have or something. So and maybe outline it a little bit more with the labels of the different themes or capacities. But this is how it all fits together. It's leadership, it's community, and then it's you as an individual, which is the inner circle. And of course, when we talk about leadership, we're talking about social force. And the test for all of the capacities is, does it increase your social force? So with resilience, does this increase your social force, your ability to take positive actions that evoke positive reactions? Does it allow you to successfully engage a moment of accountability? Those are the different ways I talk about leadership. And so the idea with resilience is that if you have too much on your plate, if you are spread too thin, if you are made vulnerable because you can't keep track of everything, because you have too many things to manage, you're spread too thin, then you might be more vulnerable to getting sick. When we're tired, when we're fatigued, we're more prone to getting sick. So that diminishes our resilience. Or if we're under criticism, or there's some heated, controversy going on, maybe our reputation is being impugned, and we're being, called upon to answer questions and defend ourselves. If we aren't resilient, then we could not be as potent in we might be taken out of the game, in other words. And then what does that do for our leadership and other people's willingness and ability to follow us and support us? So we have to demonstrate this resilience. It's really interesting in this political season, just this idea of an apology. You can't even, it's considered, you can't even apologize for something you say because it's considered weakness, and we can't allow that vulnerability. So there's a lot of just different little issues within this idea of resilience that can come to the forefront. And so as we talk about it, and it gets bigger. Well, okay. So as we talk about it, it's this idea of bouncing back. And so you see these two little characters. I call them Oompas. That's what we call these little characters in the PowerPoints. My graphics designer and I would just call them Oompas. And they're stretching this rubber band, and the rubber band is resilient unless, of course, it reaches a point where it snaps. It's so much pull in different directions. And it's that tension that we feel being pulled in different directions that stretches our resilience. And so this idea of resilience means to return to its original form. And can we return to our original form after experiencing some kind of stress, psychological, physical, social, to really kind of return to our original form, which is a reason why authenticity precedes resilience, because authenticity is about identifying what is our original form. What is my original form? Who am I at my authentic self? And then that aids in resilience, to be more authentic. aids you in being more resilient. It's hard to be resilient if you don't have that sort of baseline of authenticity. So, and actually situations that challenge our resilience are also the situations that help us grow and identify our authenticity even more. And of course, purpose helps us stay resilient because it's that idea of a purpose that's more important than the moment. It's the purpose, and that tells us what we're about, and it helps us be more resilient. You see it all the time in stories of people that have come back and endured these incredible odds in the Olympics. They always highlight these people that had a purpose that helped them practice all those late nights and travel hours to the gym or leave their families for a while to train, and all those challenges that they've had to overcome because they had a purpose that made them more resilient. So there's all these tie-ins between the capacities that can be really flavorful and cool. So any thoughts or questions before I move into the next slide?
Nope.
Very good. So what is the purpose? Again, back to purpose. I use purpose all the time too. If I have a meeting, I'm like, what's the purpose of the meeting when I write the agenda? Or if I have a phone call and I'm not sure what's going to happen, I get clear on what the purpose I want is, or I find out what the other person's purpose is. It's not just my own purpose, it's identifying theirs. But the purpose of this chapter is to prepare leaders for the difficulties of leadership and provide any insights or tools that can help bolster their resilience. And the outcome I'd like to get, because of course purpose is one end and then it helps inform the outcome on the other end, is to gain a greater appreciation of resilience that helps us contend with the challenges of leadership and increases our capacity for resilience, not just in our professional life, but our personal life as well. In fact, if I prioritize, I think resilience in our personal life is so important. When parents go home and they have families and kids and things that they have to do after a full day's work. Wow. I mean, that's a heavy load. So they really, things that happen that stress our resilience in our professional life bleed over into our personal life, and personal life bleeds back over into professional life. And so it's all interconnected. So I always like to include quotes. So I like this one: more than education, more than resilience, more than training, a person's level of resilience will determine who succeeds and who fails. And I think this is a really interesting discussion point because we do, experience is important. Training is important. Education is important. But now they're saying it's not, more important than those things is your ability to stay with something, to be resilient. So it's true in the cancer ward, it's true in the Olympics, and it's true in the boardroom. I almost said bedroom, but that could apply too. True resilience. Skip past that. Don't pretend that I didn't say that. That was supposed to be words that stay inside the head. But that's how important resilience is everywhere. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere. All right. So then I like to talk through these sometimes when I'm talking about positive leadership. Just this self-assessment could lead to some interesting discussion. So I just go through question by question. I've experienced a time when things were too much for me to handle, and I learned from it. And so when I do this with high school students, they all know that thing of putting off homework, putting off the big report, and they got to stay up all night, and then their parents want them to go to this other event, and they were planning to catch up on sleep, and it's just, it's stressful. But do you learn from it? Do you learn to manage your plate better? Do you learn to understand that kind of the way that our people who design highways, they understand that you don't determine how many cars can fit on a highway by measuring bumper to bumper. They always build in slack into their measurements of what's the capacity that our highway can sustain before we get gridlock. Gridlock. What an amazing word for what happens when our resilience is totally, absorbed, totally maxed out. It's gridlock. And so, if you've sat in a highway and you're like, why isn't everybody moving? Because the highway was not built for that many cars at that one time. They've taken up all the slack and everything's bumper to bumper. Mm-hmm. So to ask this question could lead to great conversation. I have a clear idea of how much my plate can hold and actively manage how full it gets. So plate management is something that I think is very important for resilience. And there's it's not like a plate when you go to the buffet and you're like, oh yeah, I'll just pile on. Oh, there's room here for these potatoes. Why I talk like that? These potatoes got to have some room on there, and got to get some of that coleslaw and some of that chicken. And I'm in Oklahoma. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but that's what people. You can visibly see the plate, but in our lives, our to-do lists, all of that's invisible. We don't know how long something's going to take or how much energy it's going to require. When I do my to-do list now, I don't just say how much of a priority the project is. I ask myself, how much energy will it require to engage this task? Because something could be on my to-do list that's important and I have time for it, but I'm just so drained that I don't have the wherewithal to do it. But it's about managing your plate and not about making excuses and this flakiness that I see sometimes around me and other people see around them, where it's like, oh, I can't be there for this meeting because another priority that has nothing to do with you has taken over, and I'm not managing my plate well enough. And it reduces their credibility to me if they can't manage their plate. Gosh, I could talk the whole time just on these questions. I am skilled at anticipating challenges and taking action to prevent or minimize them. I mean, truly, when it comes to resilience, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. A stitch in time, one stitch in time saves you 9 stitches later. That kind of thing. I never knew what that statement meant. A stitch in time saves 9. And I'm like, 9 what? Well, 9 stitches. It saves 9 stitches if you do it early rather than later. And so it's this idea of preventative maintenance to anticipate things. So experience does come into play. I mean, the earlier quote said that resilience is more important than experience, but experience helps increase your resilience because you now know when things are starting to pile up. You now know when you get in over your head. That's how you become more resilient, is you have to get in over your head to even know what your capacity is before something's too much. And then you learn with wisdom to not sign up for everything and volunteer for everything, but instead to manage your commitments. And what helps you manage your commitments? What helps you helps you decide if you should put something on your plate or not on your plate? Do you have a guess, Jennifer?
Knowing your purpose.
She scored. Yes. Knowing your purpose helps you become more resilient. So that's fantastic. I have a very clear process for dealing with setbacks and disappointments. A routine you go through, some hidey hole, some people that you could count on, your resilience squad, your activities that help you blow off steam and keep you kind of, I was going to say regulated, but I don't, you know what I mean? But whatever, you know what I mean? I'm talking about resilience and all of that. So to let go of some of that exhaust, some of that tension that might build up over time. People notice the benefits of exercise just for stress management, and it helps them be more resilient. And then they get out of the habit and they're like, oh man, I'm such a dummy because when I was exercising, there were so many benefits. So what do you have as a way to deal with setbacks and disappointments? Do you have that sounding board, that confidant that you could talk to? Journaling is also a really great way to just kind of have an internal conversation about those things that are weighing on your mind. So that's something I would ask people. I have identified ways that I sabotage my success and have taken steps to manage them or prevent them. What are our self-sabotaging principles? There's this amazing TED Talk I just saw recently, and it's about this guy talking about the stress monster, and we need the stress monster that forces us out of procrastination and this whole routine. If I can find it, I'll put it up on the website as a resource, because we sabotage ourselves in all kinds of ways, whether it's the procrastination, whether it's taking on too many things, whether it's being a people pleaser, whether it's you don't address an issue because it's awkward and you don't want to upset the apple cart, but then it becomes worse. So there's different ways we sabotage our own success. We don't manage our boundaries, different things like that. So that's an interesting conversation right there. I know effective ways for me to recharge my batteries. So what recharges your batteries? I know for me, I just need to unplug. I just feel like my nerves are like wires that are getting fried, and I just need to I'm not effective when I'm in that state, no matter what I need to get done or whatever. So I know I need to recharge, and I have my little things that I like to do to recharge. I like to watch breakdancing videos. See, I mean, it could be goofy and whatever, but whatever it is that really recharges you. And I am sensitive. And the last question is usually a question that talks about applying the capacity to other people. So in this case, it's, I am sensitive to the level of stress among those closest to me, and I assist them. I take time out to ask people how they're doing. Just that alone, that expression of care or concern can alleviate someone's stress. When I was in college, I had this professor, and he talked about this idea he had that we all walk around with baskets, these invisible baskets. And as we go through the day, we collect rocks in the basket, sort of weighs us down. But then also throughout the day could be something that takes the rock out, a rock out of our basket. So at the end of the day, are we left with more rocks or less rocks? And can you be one of those people that helps remove rocks from other people's baskets? Because we collect them all the time. It's like, oh, I got to get to work. Oh, but my kids are oversleeping, or they're ill. I got to call into the school. Oh, I got the traffic accident, and now I'm going to be late. And I got this meeting coming up, and I'm going to look bad, and that's not good. And then you get there and you realize that there's a button missing on your shirt or something, and you're like, oh gosh, it's like rock after rock after rock in your basket. And so can you manage that? Can you know that it's happening while it's happening and know the effect it's having on you and relieve those rocks, or do that for other people and not be someone that puts a rock in their basket? You might be mad at the teller at the bank because they're taking their time, and you're just going to just say something and just, and it's going to be a rock in their basket. And so it's just something to think about, not just your own resilience, but that of others. If you're dealing with somebody that their resilience is tapped out, do you want to proceed with talking with them about an important issue, or do you want to do something to help recharge them first? Stop. When I teach my Talent to Strength workshops, one time there was just a group of guys, and they were all men, and they were all airplane pilots and mechanics, and none of them wanted to be in the room. It was a big drain on their battery, and I just had to stop, and I acknowledged. I said, the first thing I said when I addressed the group was, you don't want to be here. I know that, acknowledge where people are, that kind of thing. So anyway, any thoughts or questions on any of these?
No, but they're great combo starters, great conversation starters for sure.
Yes. So sometimes this is all I would talk about. I would never even make it past this, because by the time I say some things and relate some things, then other people get excited and they want to share, or they want to ask questions. Then it automatically leads us into the content anyway, because I write these items in order of the content in the chapter.
Aha.
Not just a hat rack, this thing. So what is resilience? I really like this book, The Resiliency Advantage. There's a lot of books on resilience, and I'm sure there's other ones that are great. I just haven't read them or whatever. But here's how the author talks about resilience. These words, resilience, resilient, resiliency, they refer to the ability to cope with high levels of ongoing disruptive change. See, when everything's going as I plan and everything's going to my routine, it doesn't cause me a lot of, it doesn't drain my battery very much. And so I will talk about StrengthsFinder for a minute. Those 5 themes that you have as your top 5 and that I have as my top 5, and they're different. Those are things that are, they're my spontaneous reactions to the environment. And I've been practicing them my whole life. I just fall into those routines. They take no energy. It's when I have to access other talents that I have to dig deep, and I have to think about things, and I have to really, invest energy in them. So things that are foreign to us, things that are changes, especially disruptive changes, those can lessen our resilience or draw from our reserves.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to sustain good health and energy when under constant pressure. And some people don't. Some people don't really do well with pressure. And we live in an environment of constant pressure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great video called The Hidden Face of a Killer, and it's about stress. It's this documentary it's on YouTube. I think it's called Stress, The Hidden Face of a Killer. And it's because stress causes this constant release of harmful chemicals. In the short term, those chemicals help us overcome and release adrenaline and help us get through a challenge, because that's how we were evolved to deal with change and stress in our environment. Stress was immediate, and if you overcame it, then you were good, you could relax. But today's environment is not about immediate short burst challenges. It's about slow, steady, constant feeling of your inbox that's full and you haven't emptied it. It's the deadline weighing over your head. It's the impending layoff at the company and you don't know if you're going to have your job or what. These are the kinds of things that are constant pressure. So overcoming adversities is what resilience is about. And it's about changing to a new way of working and thinking when the old way is no longer possible. And so Ron Heifetz, one of the great kind of thinkers about leadership, talks about adaptive challenges. And when we have adaptive challenges, our natural tendency is to provide the technical fixes, the things we would always do in a situation. And that's not an adaptive challenge. It requires us to do something different than we've always done in the past. Mm-hmm. And lastly here, we have to do all this without acting in dysfunctional or harmful ways. What are the ways that we damage ourselves? What are the dysfunctional ways we deal with this? We deny, we blame other people. And when we talk about denial, that'll get into the reason chapter, really important tie in there. But we blame other people. We numb ourselves out, and you can just pick your poison for doing that. Mm-hmm. So these are all signs of a lack of resilience when we're being dysfunctional or harmful to ourselves or others. Mm. So I thought that paints a nice picture, not a nice picture, but it paints a clear picture of what we're talking about when we're talking about resilience.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. I think the adaptation piece, or being adaptive, that's really, I see that play out so much, especially working in a nonprofit and working with lots of social change organizations that do what they do because they've always done it. Mm-hmm. and resist changing with the times or with the changing complexity of their issues. Mm-hmm. I see that as a huge challenge all the time in terms of resilience and within the nonprofit sector and social change work. So, yeah.
And I think, I've been spending a lot of time lately, just mainly last night, I was thinking about what makes for a mature person. What are signs that a person has a more mature level of development? I'm not talking about age, because right. I've met young people that are extremely mature and older people that are extremely immature. And I was thinking, like little things like with my dog, I just give my dog a treat. When I was less mature, I used to kind of like tease my dog with the treat. And, look what I have and you don't, and look how cute you look because you want. And I'm like, that's immature, And I think so that's the kind of stuff I was thinking about. I was thinking about if you owe somebody money and you give it to them in a way that's kind of begrudging, then that's an immature person. I think an immature person is like, I owe you this money. You've earned this money. I am happy for you to have this money, So you could deal with people who are immature about it or mature about it. But here, the last thing I wanted to bring up was how you deal with other people when you're under stress and your resilience is being challenged is a sign of how mature you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how can you own it? Can you contain it? And I think that increases your social force if you're somebody that does that. You know, to be like the person, I heard this quote, that looks like that's like a duck, calm on top but paddling like the Dickens underneath. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but without being in denial about it too. You know, some people are calm on top as a denial mechanism, and I don't mean that, because I think that could be damaging as when we get to reason. But anyway, we're going to talk about adaptive responses here a little bit right in this module. So I'm glad you like that. So I thought of it this way, that there's sort of a capacity to demand ratio. Now, this image isn't fully accurate, because if we were to try to make the comparison that we are the battery over here, we're the battery, and then these are the demands life places on us to draw from our battery, like these are just devices, but it would be like maybe 100 other things connected to the battery would be more realistic. So I have to update this image. I have another image, I don't know why it's not in here, that really shows that it's way more things drawing on our battery than just 3 things. You know, it's way more than that. And so, you know, resilience is about where we are in terms of our capacity. Are we at full capacity, or are we really running on fumes? So I think this is a really, you know, this diagram is meant to illustrate visually what we're talking about with resilience. It's the ratio between how much capacity you have and how much is being demanded of that capacity. And when your demand exceeds your capacity, you are drawing on your resilience. You're draining that reserve you have. You're maxing out your resources. And we know what this is like when our car starts billowing smoke from the hood, when our computer flickers on and off, you know, shuts down, freezes or whatever. Our power, you know, we get a brownout or even a blackout. You know, that's just too much demand on the capacity. When we're waiting in line on, you know, Black Friday or whatever those shopping days are called, it's too much capacity, you know, too much demand on too limited capacity. That's what's happening. And it happens to us. That's what happens when we're feeling less resilient. So this is kind of like a model that comes from organizational thinking, but it applies to day-to-day life. I mean, everybody goes through this entrepreneurial phase. You know, it's the young person going to school and working a part-time job or full-time job and making ends meet. It's the young family, the parents that have like young kids and they're not sleeping a lot, but they still have to be up at work and, you know, all of that. It's when you start a business, of course, that's the traditional way of thinking about this. You're starting a business, nobody knows you exist, you're working extra hours, you're barely making by with your income versus the debts you got to pay, but you somehow stick it out and you get here. You get to the top of this upward line, and you can look back behind you and all that you had to overcome to get there, and you're like, oh, if I knew ahead of time, well, all that I would have had to overcome, I don't know how I would have made it. I don't know how I made it this far. I don't know how I made it through this. I don't know how I made it out of high school. You know, me personally, I didn't do any homework. I don't know how I shouldn't have made it out of high school, much less college, you know, and even beyond that a little bit. I don't know how to use commas. I don't know. I just know that a comma should go here. I don't know the rules of like an Oxford comma. I don't even know how I know what an Oxford comma is. You know? But, you know, somehow I made it through. I mean, I think of some of the stupid things I did and some of the stupid people I hung out with and the bad decisions I almost made or did make but didn't end up turning out bad. And here I am. So finally, plateau. We love a plateau. Rest, coast, reclaim some energy, capture your breath. And we want to stay in a plateau. Everything's nice in a plateau. It's hunky-dory. But then something happens. The world does not let us stay in a plateau. It introduces a challenge, or, you know, we introduce it. But somewhere along the way, we get a challenge that demands us to change. And one of two things happens. We kind of descend into chaos if we haven't recognized the change and it was a significant enough change and we didn't adapt, or we did adapt and it created new opportunities. And we see it all the time in business. A guy went to the guys who own Blockbuster Video and said, "Hey, I have this great idea, and it's renting DVDs over the internet, and we mail it to people, and they mail it back." And Blockbuster laughed them out of the room, and then those guys went on to start Netflix.
Uh-huh.
And now we know about Netflix, but we don't know about Blockbuster anymore.
Uh-huh.
And even Netflix is now under challenge. Amazon Prime is, like things change. Nothing lets us stay the same. And so we have to adapt or die. There's this quote I like, and I'll butcher it a little bit, but it said, "Learners inherit the earth, while those who fail to learn find themselves perfectly equipped for a world that no longer exists." Yeah. And so we stay in our plateau. We like it. We don't want to change. But then something happens to us that forces us to change and adapt and respond. And so that's called an adaptive challenge. And if we apply a technical fix, which is a problem we already know how to fix, so the solution is in our repertoire. And so that's what they mean by a technical fix. It's just technical. It's just do the thing you already know how to do. But then if you do those technical fixes, but the challenge is adaptive, it's not going to work.
Right.
So anyway, I don't know if this captures some of that adaptive quality, or if you like this, or if I've properly related an organizational model to an individual's life. But that's my vision here for this model.
I think it's great. I'm going to use it actually tomorrow.
Awesome.
I was actually thinking when I was reading this chapter a few weeks back that because we're having a discussion at my board meeting tomorrow about moving into strategic planning and board engagement. And this is just a really helpful tool to say to my board, where do you think we're at on the spectrum? I mean, I have a sense of where we are. I know where we are, but I'm going to put it out to them. And I think actually we're at this plateau phase, but we're just about to turn the curve of that. Mm-hmm. We need to adapt, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's an excellent diagram, and I think it can be totally applied to both a personal context and an organizational context as well.
Yep. I mean, I think you could talk about it with in couples and marriage or whatever. You could say, where are we? The dating phase. Oh, that was fun and exciting. And oh gosh, can you believe that? My parents hated you, but yet we're together. Oh yeah, but your parents were right. No, I'm just kidding. But and then you're like, oh wow, we're in a plateau. This is nice. Or change is happening. Health changes. Kids happen. In-laws and health issues happen, and financial stuff happens, and somebody in the relationship discovers something new about themselves, and that's okay, well, how are we going to deal with that? Wow. Like a relationship, a job, a business, your education, all of them are this kind of journey. This is basically one frame, and our life is like the movie of all of this different points of this model, and we're up and we're down and we hit rock bottom, but then we make an adjustment and we come back and we're better than we were before.
Yep.
Good stuff. All right. So I talk about things like, I guess, here I should have some more notes, but I'm just kind of breaking it down, talking about the entrepreneurial phase. And I don't know, in the book, I guess I would have more thoughts. Maybe in the PowerPoint itself, it has notes. I don't know if it does. But the slides just kind of visually show each phase. Oh, the plateau. Oh, that's nice. Camp out, relax. And then the adaptive challenge and how are we going to respond to it? So there aren't really any discussion points here, just some more oompas. I talk about in the chapters ideas for building resilience. So from an article, there's 3 building blocks of resilience. Staunch acceptance of reality. This gets to reason. Reason is, all about this piece here. Make meaning out of difficult times. That's an important thing. Mm-hmm. Make do with whatever is at hand. So I don't know, like I'm looking at those and I'm like, well, we need to break those down. We need to get into those a little bit more. But another thing that we could do is self-monitor. Always being mindful of our capacity to demand ratio is really important. And if we don't take time to reflect and see where we're at, we'll miss the signs. Knowing things to which we say yes or no. Again, this is where the purpose comes in, and we just have to know we can't say yes to everything. There's 3 types of coping, and the chapter goes into this. There's coping, then there's anticipatory coping, and then there's preventative coping. And so coping is kind of this idea of okay, something bad happened, now let's address it, doing triage. And anticipatory coping is something, I'm about to get overrun, let me kind of do some things to kind of bolster myself. And preventative coping is from getting overrun, having the demand exceed the capacity, early on. I like when, like, if you have a board member or somebody you want to recruit to your board, and they say, you know what, I want to know a little bit more about what's expected first. I appreciate that conversation more than somebody who's like, yeah, I'm in, they don't even think about it. So I want people, I like to see preventative coping in people to say, let me think about it before I commit. And even if they don't do that, I will have them do that. I'll ask them, to really think about something if I make a request to somebody to make sure they can deliver. Because I want to know now and not find out later to be disappointed, which still might happen even if they had thought about it and reflected upon it, So, but I can minimize the risk of that. And that's preventative coping. That's thinking ahead of time and knowing yourself, being authentic, knowing what your purpose is, all can help minimize those high demands that exceed our capacity. So there's some stuff, potential factors that affect our resilience. I mean, really, here's this new one, fear of missing out, because you get on Facebook. And, when you get on Facebook, you're like bored. You have nothing better to do. That's why you're on Facebook usually. And what you're looking at are people who've posted their greatest hits, their greatest moments in life. So now you're seeing all these people with their greatest moments, and you're going, oh man, my life must really suck in comparison. But it's an illusion. And it's brought on by that fear of missing out. Let's see, what else? Clutter. And I talk about these things, clutter can reduce your resilience. You just, it's like your house is like a bigger version of a junk drawer. And it's just you just haven't had a place to put it. And that's the essence of resilience. I want to share this because I really love this. On the website, I just added this. That's not it. On the website here, where you as the director can go into the resources for resilience, I have some videos. This is an amazing video. You see this woman, it's an amazing athletic experience. And you see somebody digging deep for resilience. I can't remember why I put this one up here. This is a video. This is from this movie that no one's ever heard of called Haiku Tunnel. And I'm not saying it's very good at all, but I can relate to this character who's putting off things. And he gets this advice in this scene that's kind of quirky and funny, but it's kind of like what you need to do to get back in the game. And then this plate spinning video, this is my mental model for resilience is, you see the vaudeville plate spinner, and then, how many plates can they spin before they all come crashing down? It's a great metaphor for resilience. So I love that. But it's this video that I just added. Exactly. It's so iconic.
I've seen it many times.
Yes. and really it would prompt some great discussion, because here is Lucy and Ethel, and they're going to be wrapping chocolates, and they get it from this mysterious person on the other side of the wall who's operating the conveyor belt and can speed it up or slow it down. But that's life. Life is sending stuff downstream to us, and then they get all this, but they don't have a place to put it. And there's the lesson. If you are getting stuff from upstream, you're downstream, and you don't have downstream systems to put everything, then it's all going to back up, and you're going to be putting chocolate in your shirt, in your hat, and all this like they're doing in the scene. And so, yes, it's funny, and yes, it's iconic, but it's so emblematic. It could lead to a really rich discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I'm on this and I'm applying this to myself, there's this gentleman I met recently, and his name's Tiago Forte, and he created this series of videos around how to design your workflow so that you can keep track of everything. And he uses a couple of things. He uses a system many people will have heard of called Getting Things Done. It's a process for handling stuff coming at you from upstream and how to process it, making sure you have your downstream system set up. But in a digital age, so using two tools, Evernote and then a task managing software, and together he creates this elegant system for managing all of that. And so I highly recommend it. I don't know how you would use this in your positive leadership curriculum, but I just throw it out there because it's all relevant. It's all stuff that's happening. So this really kind of brings us to the end. As you can see, the PowerPoint is a little more sparse than some of the other ones but you can customize it and tailor it and use any of those videos from the website here. So very cool to draw on those resources, show any of these videos, watch them yourself, see which ones resonate for you, have some discussion points for it. And then I also mentioned that I would bring up the field guide for resilience. So I wanted to just do that for a minute because I don't know if I've ever really talked about any of the field guides in these videos, but this is a resource for every capacity chapter, meaning not for the introduction chapter, not for the conclusion, but all the capacities. There's a field guide, and it's in its first draft, so it's always going to improve and become better. But you'll see some exercises that you could do. Just list everything that drains your battery, then list everything that charges your battery. So just a little self-assessment, and I think you'd need more room than what's available here. So, do it on separate sheets or whatever. But I think that could be a great self-awareness activity. This is this amazing, amazing video. You could even show this one. It's kind of heart-wrenching. But watch this video and then consider these lessons. Powerful story, really inspiring story, by the way. So it's the kind of thing where you watch and you go, no matter how bad things are for you, you watch this video and you go, all right, there's somebody who has it worse, and they made it through, and it should be kind of inspirational that way. Yeah, so this page here is about connecting purpose to this idea of resilience. So that's all that's here. This idea of decluttering can really unlock a lot of energy. We store up a lot of energy in the things, physical cluttering, electronic cluttering, our inbox. We just feel there's such a release of energy that comes when we just handle these things that are cluttered. And the reason things get cluttered is we didn't have a system for processing it downstream from us. We didn't have a downstream place to send it to. It's kind of like when you go to your mailbox, but it's, you look at what the mailman sent you and you shove it back in the mailbox, and you do that every day, and you use your mailbox to store stuff. That's kind of what we do in our lives. So really cool. I don't know if I referenced it. Yeah, I do. This is a great book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. It's getting a lot of buzz, a lot of traction, and for good reason. Very good system. Humor, using humor to laugh at ourselves, to really see this. So in an episode of Downton Abbey, I don't know if you can see this, there's this water bottle sitting on the mantle there. Well, it's a period piece, and they didn't have water bottles then. They weren't so stupid as to think that, I should buy water in a bottle and pay $2 for it. They have water bottles. And then here's the cast of Downton Abbey kind of laughing at that mistake, and they all are holding up water bottles and taking a cast picture together. What are you going to do?
Right.
It's already aired. There's the water bottle, and laughing at our mistakes is kind of using humor as a way to cope is a really powerful thing when it's appropriate. And gratitude when things are down, to really, that's a real test. To really, when you're in a bad mood, you're maxed out, to really sit there and think, all right, what is there to be grateful for? That's a real test. That's a sign of maturity. And it has a powerful effect. Really puts things in perspective. Here's a little test. A sister concept to resilience is grit. And so there's this little test, and there's a great TED Talk on this as well. Grit is not quite the same as resilience, but they're really, really similar concepts. So you can take this little assessment. The researcher's name is Duckworth. I can't remember her first name. So, these are just some things. We're all familiar with that book, Mindset, Carol Dweck's book, or maybe we're not familiar, but we may have heard about it. And really examining a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset has a lot to do with resilience. I didn't know there was so much in here. This book, The War of Art, which is kind of a reversal on the famous book, The Art of War, but The War of Art, which is about resistance and how whenever we try to do something creative and there's just this resistance that we meet, and it comes in all these different forms. And so really art is a war against resistance. And then some other books. So, we're always trying to improve these field guides. And if anybody has suggestions, email us with that. But that really rounds out everything I wanted to talk about with resilience. I wanted to see if this gives you some ideas, some directions for where to go. Any of this helpful for your bus dilemma, or any other thoughts related to your understanding of resilience?
Yeah, I mean, I think I may still have a week to figure out the specifics of what I do, but I like the idea of, because we had talked before we started filming about, well, we could always push back resiliency to the next month. And I'd rather not do that. Because I think there's an opportunity as we see our state reps throughout the day to kind of think about resilience and how it relates to government. And so what I'm leaning to is somehow providing the group some kind of activity or a discussion guide or something to encourage them when they get on the bus. We're going to have an hour and a half of time that they talk about the chapter or do some kind of exercise in a pair. And then what I'm thinking what might be fun is on the way back, encouraging folks to sit with different people and share maybe both the outcome of their morning discussion on the bus and also how it might have, how they've seen that capacity play out throughout the day. So that way it's still there and we haven't, skipped over it or pushed it back or.
As you're talking, another idea that comes to mind is, I noticed that you're wrestling with, it's on your shoulders. You've adopted it on your shoulders to solve this problem. And I'm just wondering what it would look like to open it up to the class and let them know, here's the dilemma for this upcoming class. It's really important that we cover resilience, but here's the reasons why it might be challenging. What ideas do you have for covering this?
That's an interesting way to do it. I'm just wondering how much you
might not get any, but the fact that you do that is a way to cope with stress. Leaders, and this is a Heifetz point too, Ron Heifetz. He talks about how leaders, they just assume that it's all on their shoulders. But that part of the job of the leader is to put the weight of the problem on the community's shoulders. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I know that you're a responsible type and you do the homework and you're always doing what you should do. And so you might be thinking, oh, this is my problem to solve. But I think if you open it up to the class, maybe you can get their cooperation and being like, all right, everybody, let's commit to reading this chapter. Or let's really commit to, when we have our discussions on the bus, our partners, that we really do, use a good portion of that time. It doesn't have to be the whole time, but that we really take on this task.
Right.
At a time. Just a thought.
No, that's a great idea.
Okay.
I like that idea. I'm just thinking if, I might just do that to put it out to the group to show that I'm encouraging their input. Mm-hmm. And, of course, because I need to be prepared. I'll have something in my back pocket.
Yeah, of course. Always have something in that back pocket. So good. Any thoughts or comments as we round this out and conclude?
No, this is great. I'm actually excited now to see how I'm going to make this play out or how it will all play out. Yeah. And I think it's good. A different format is good. And I think if I can demonstrate to the class that this material can be sort of taken in many different directions. I think that's a good thing. It's not so prescriptive,
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a good challenge to have.
It's an adaptive challenge.
An adaptive challenge, and I'll look forward to reporting back on how
Yes.
it all plays out.
Yes. And our next episode will be on community building.
Yes.
So that'll be interesting. And I look forward to hearing how this went.
All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks for doing this.
All right.
All right. See ya.
See ya.